Good afternoon, and welcome to the first 2020 HELSUS Syke and Luke joint Viikki Sustainability Research Seminar here in Viikki campus. And we have a full room here locally, and also hello to you who are listening to this online from wherever you are. We have the topic of today focusing on nature-based solutions, and we have three super interesting presentations, rather quick ones, and then hopefully we will have, after all the three have been over, we will have still a little bit time for discussion and quick reflection. So as the first speaker, I have a pleasure to introduce Professor Christopher Raymond, who is a HELSUS professor in sustainability science, and I'm sorry, Chris, I can't remember the extension. It was ecosystem services and
sustainability transformations and ecosystem services. Yeah.
Super.
Great.
So Chris will start, and he will talk about the nature-based solutions to promote carbon neutrality, environmental justice, and well-being in urban areas. And his insights are coming from international experiences in Europe. So please, Chris, floor is yours, and max 15 minutes to go.
Thank you. Do I need the microphone on, or?
You have the...
Oh, this one on, of course, yes. Okay, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. So I've been involved in this nature-based solutions topic for about 4 or 5 years now, heavily involved in advising a number of European projects on nature-based solutions, and also have a couple of my own. And so today I'm going to give some synthetic or synthesis of insights from different parts of Europe. For those who don't know, we are in this climate emergency. This slide highlights that even a small change in temperature is going to have radical effects on not only the environment but also human well-being in very different ways. For example, if we take a 2100 scenario and a 0.5 degree rise, an extra 60 million people will be exposed to drought as one example of the effects. And this comes from the IPCC's recent report of 2019, where they're modelling the effects of climate change across 0.5 degree increments. And so we have to do something fast. And this area of nature-based solutions tries to address this through nature-inspired solutions. So nature-based solutions are inspired and supported by nature, which are cost-effective, simultaneously provide environmental, social and economic benefits, and help build resilience. They're also framed in the context of nature-based innovations, for example, innovations to address climate issues such as heat, island effects, water issues, carbon issues, environmental issues like noise and dust, social issues like cohesion, health and well-being, and economic issues, including social innovation. We mainly think about type 3 in nature-based solutions, which is the design and management of new ecosystems. But we also must not forget about type 1 and type 2, which is the better use of natural ecosystems, as well as the increasing sustainability and multifunctionality of managed ecosystems. But today I'm primarily going to talk about type 3. So just to give you some examples from the Vation project, which is a research and innovation project funded by Horizon 2020. They're working on a range of cases across Europe, including establishing new green corridors in Barcelona. It's establishing new pocket parks or informal parks in places like Utrecht. Creating new forms of innovative governance in Newcastle, where they're trying to combine public and private sector finance to look at new ways of both creating and managing green areas. But right through to more social aspects in this other project called Connecting in Nature, where they're looking at the social cohesion benefits of wildflower nurseries in Glasgow, trying to turn disused zoos into showcases for art and nature in Genk, right through to looking at developing floodplains to support a range of recreational activities in Poznan. The nature-based solutions can take on a range of forms. And the point is that when we think about the climate benefits of nature-based solutions, they're quite impactful. A recent report by Nature for Climate highlighted that there's been a $1 billion investment in in nature-based solutions by the Green Cities program of the European Bank between 2016 and 2019. There's been an additional 2.5 billion committed by municipal projects, and together they have reduced, sequestered 372,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide, and which have benefited approximately 25 million people. So the message out of this is, yes, we have an emergency, but we also have solutions to start addressing climate issues. But it's not just about climate mitigation and adaptation. Hopefully these examples I've showed you highlight the fact that nature-based solutions can also support issues like water management, coastal resilience, green space management, but also a variety of aspects of human well-being and social cohesion. And so in nature-based solutions research, we try to talk about co-benefits and costs, so that any given intervention can have a benefit in one area, but also benefits in multiple other areas, but also can have some costs, as I will reveal in a minute. So one way to find out these costs and benefits is by going to this Urban Nature Atlas, which Vation has developed based upon 1,000 nature-based solutions across Europe. And here you can click on different examples of nature-based solutions in different parts of Europe. For example, there's 287 examples from London alone. And what they've tried to do here is look at the different domains where nature-based solutions have been implemented, ranging from parks and urban gardens right through to green indoor areas. And the point here is that most of the nature-based solutions have been dedicated to parks and urban areas, less so to external buildings, and even less so to green indoor areas. Then they looked at, in this atlas, which parts of the urban fabric are these nature-based solutions being applied to. Most common funding sources are in relation to urban green areas and urban blue areas. Less funding is going to external building greens, derelict areas, etc. But there is variation within these different types. Then they're looking at, okay, where is hybrid governance models being devoted? So not only public money, but public and private money. And what they found is that lots of the nature-based solutions are government-led, as highlighted by the blue here. Some are co-governance, particularly in the 100 to 500,000 euro innovation bracket and the above 4 million. But some are also led by non-government actors. So this points to the need to look at not only the role of the state in providing nature-based solutions, but also the role of non-government organisations and the private sector in supporting nature-based solutions. And then looking at which areas or what are the outcomes of these nature-based solutions. Most of them have focused on the biodiversity benefits. Some have looked at sustainable consumption production benefits, but least of all is the cultural heritage and inclusive and effective governance benefits. So this points to either a research gap or just the reality that most of the work is being dedicated to biodiversity conservation at present. Then the project tried to link this to the UN Sustainability Development Goals, or UN SDGs. And of the 1,000 projects, they tried to map what are the dominant outcomes in relation to those SDGs. And most projects have been focusing on green spaces and habitats. Some are looking at regeneration, land use and urban development. But at the least dedicated outcomes are to coastal resilience and marine protection. Interesting climate action. There has been some work in that area, but not as much as one might have thought. But the social justice, cohesion and cultural heritage elements are still largely unaddressed. So that's Vation, and the question is, the fundamental difference between Vation and this next project, Connecting Nature, is that Connecting Nature is very much looking at the social cohesion and justice benefits of nature-based solutions. And what that's suggesting is that we need to move from just assessment of the effectiveness of nature-based solutions to processes for facilitating understanding and upscaling of nature-based solutions across urban areas. So they have, with the Urban by Nature program, they developed this process of engaging different communities in nature-based solutions initiatives. And it's a 7-stage process, from joining to exploring to prioritising to committing to implementing to monitoring and to upscaling. And important is that there is this strong focus on learning and improving together as opposed to doing things in isolation. But there is some problems here. And despite how much we devote to co-creation and community empowerment, there is this big issue that's coming up more and more. There's growing evidence to suggest that nature-based solutions lead to gentrification. By gentrification, I mean that it's forcing out the lower socioeconomic groups from areas as a result of rising property prices, as well as other forces. And the question is, how do we start to address the cost of nature-based solutions, not only the benefits? Just to highlight this, some work of my colleague Nadja Kavish in Germany highlighted the fact that, okay, here in Berlin is where the majority of the green areas are, but look at where the percentage of children are located is almost the opposite. So children are not located next to green spaces. So that relates to a distributional justice issue. But a lot of the elderly people are located next to green spaces, suggesting that they have lived there for some time and have had more economic means to get close to those areas. And so there's a recent paper in Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences which says that, yes, nature-based solutions and green infrastructure lead to a range of benefits, but there's also a range of displacement factors, such as real estate speculation leading to increased costs and greater difficulty to adapt to, and people being forced out, leading to greater difficulty for those people to adapt to new social networks, etc. And so the key message from all this is, across Europe we can see that nature-based solutions provide a range of environmental and societal benefits, but we need to be more discerning about their costs to different groups or actors in society, including the young, including the elderly, as well as other groups. And what, if you look at this literature in more detail, what we find is that more attention needs to be paid to co-benefits and cost of nature-based solutions for specific groups, particularly vulnerable groups. And by vulnerable groups, I not only mean children, but also new migrant groups, people of different sexual orientation, etc. We need to demonstrate pathways for inclusive and effective governance. One of the slides earlier highlighted that the least investments of all is going into looking at the effects of nature-based solutions on governance processes. Governments and other groups love to implement nature-based solutions, but they don't necessarily want to follow up the monitoring and evaluation, which is crucial to the governance of these systems. And we need to think about how nature-based solution impacts occur across system boundaries. So the green and the grey, or what I call the in-between, the smart and the nature-based, so the whole smart cities agenda, how that intersects with the nature-based solutions agenda. The physical landscape, which is the concrete, the walls, the physical trees around us, together with the symbolic urbanism, which is what we perceive to be important in the landscape. And also the legal jurisdictions and regulatory jurisdictions, recognising that different regions and different cultures have different legal instruments, but also legal contexts which affect the implementation and upscaling of nature-based solutions. Probably one of the biggest questions at the moment is, how do we engage businesses at varieties of levels in nature-based solutions to facilitate upscaling? And there's a lot of work now being done on developing new business models for replication and upscaling of nature-based solutions. And that then also leads to the point that we need greater work looking at the economic development and employment benefits of nature-based solutions if we are wanting to engage with a broader society around nature-based solutions. So I think that's it. Thank you very much. That's my 15 minutes. Happy to be contacted on my email. Also, I haven't talked about my project so much today, but Viva Plan is very much looking at the environmental justice consequences of nature-based solutions. So thank you.
Really wonderful and effective presentation in a quarter of an hour. Now we have one or two quick comments or questions opportunity if anybody wants to raise anything immediately.
So it's a lot there in 15 minutes, but hopefully gave you a snapshot of this area.
You seem to emphasize that the cost side of things is the more unknown territory. What would you recommend as kind of a clear things to be done on that side?
Well, cost can come in different forms. I think at one level we need to look at economic cost, but it's also cost in terms of gentrification, as I mentioned, cost in terms of looking at how, for example, putting in trees in one area may benefit one community, but it could affect another through shading and other effects. So the cost, in other words, the trade-offs that are occurring between groups. It might benefit one group, but it cost another. And these are often can vary across geographic scales and across industry sectors. I often encourage people not just to look at the cost in isolation, but the cost in relation to the benefits.
Very good. If there's not immediate questions, now let's move on to the second presentation, and maybe while we have these others rolling on, you still come up with some questions to Chris. Exactly, now I see Arttu there, so I think you need a mic in order to be heard. So while Mario is setting herself up, let's hear this question.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for an interesting presentation. My only question would have been that how burdening you see the municipal planning process for, is there the enabling environment for nature-based solutions? In your case studies, for example.
Very good, and in fact that's one of the gaps is how do we promote effective governance processes for nature-based solutions? And I would argue that there's a lot of test cases now looking at how do we start to develop new governance processes, and particularly multi-level governance processes and policy processes to embed nature-based solutions into city planning. And Utrecht is one of the best examples, I think, in Europe for that. But there's still a long way to go in building not only the governance processes to support nature-based solutions, but the political ownership for nature-based solutions across society. I would argue there's probably more political ownership for the smart cities agenda at the moment than the green agenda. And how do we sort of change the balance is the big question. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. So the next presenter is Marjo Neuvonen, who are a senior researcher from Natural Resources Finland. And Marjo's topic today is forests and nature from the residents' physical activity point of view. And you have interesting new results from Helsinki. And before you start, I have to reveal a secret. Marjo and me, we come from a tiny little village, same side of the eastern Finland. So we have a kind of a roots back there. But please, you also have your 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Thank you. And good afternoon for everyone. My topic today is related to urban forests and urban green environments and how they are affecting on residents' physical activity. And this is a case study from Helsinki. And this is there is a research team behind this study, so I'd like to mention my colleague Katja Kangasan-Ojala and Liisa Tyrväinen. And this is also a part of a Nature Move project we recently conducted in Luke. Well, we know the fact is that in modern societies in Finland, we have too low level of physical activity, and we also know that it's a key health risk factor. And majority of us are living in urban environments. And also there are, it has been seen that there is increase in lifestyle and rest-related diseases. So that's a background for our study. Just to give you a little bit of overview what kind of studies and research we have done in Luke, I'd like to give you a couple of examples. So we have had and done field experiments and experimental studies, and we have been looking in different environments and how they will affect on stress relief during the working day and after the working day. And one of the projects was called Green Health, and that was conducted in Helsinki. And the other example we had, it has been taking a place in a laboratory environment in Otaniemi. And there we were looking how the virtual nature environment affecting on stress relief during the working day. So these are the examples of the studies. Another approach we have in Luke that we do quite a lot of population surveys, and with this we have been looking, for example, individual and environmental factors that are related to outdoor recreation and exercising in nature environments. And we also have been looking at the mechanisms behind the health and well-being effects. And all these are kind of a multidisciplinary studies. We have done them together with Health and Welfare Institute Finland, but also with the universities Tampere and University of Helsinki. And just now, right now, we are collecting new data. We are monitoring outdoor recreation among the Finns, and it's kind of part of our monitoring system where we like to see and follow the outdoor activities people have. So that's just a little bit of background what kind of research we do. Well, but focusing on today's topic, there's quite nice illustration by Professor Terry Hartig and his colleagues showing the pathways and links how the natural environment is affecting on health and well-being. And the research evidence indicates that nature has this positive influence on restoration and rest recovery, physical activity, and also improved social relationships. And today we are focusing one of them, and it's the physical activity. So that's something we had in mind when we were starting the Nature Move project. And in this project we had researchers among the forest sciences, sports sciences, environmental psychology, environmental health, and GIS. And we were focusing on urban areas here. And it was financed by Ministry of Education and Culture and also Luke. So the aim here was to study the role of nature in activating people, and also we wanted to know better the environments that are encouraging people to green exercise. And for green exercise we mean here very intensive physical activity, but also the daily use of green environments, also going there just for relaxing and spending time. And we also wanted to look at whether there are possible hindrances that limit the use of these green areas in Helsinki. So we conducted a survey, and it was random sample based, and we also let the people map the places they used for green exercise in this study. So we had 3 study sites, one in the north and one in the eastern part of Helsinki, and one rather close to the center. And we can see they are a little bit of different. They differ from the availability of green environments, but also they were a little bit of different comparing the socioeconomic factors of the residents living in these areas. And these blue areas, they were selected for the study. So we had quite nice data. We had more than 1,000 respondents. And when we compared to this data to the population structure, we found that it's rather nicely representative, except two things. We realized that our data is a bit more focused on active citizens than those that are less active. And our data was also a bit more focused on middle age and older age groups. But we got more than 3,700 markings on the map. And what we found that most of our respondents, they really considered the green environments important for their everyday living. And we found also that more than 1/3 of the leisure time physical activity among these residents in this study is taking a place in natural environment. And we also estimated some of the distances people mentioned or marked on the map, and we found that average distance to places for outdoor recreation and exercising was a little less than 3 kilometers, and average distance to closest place was 1.3 kilometers in average. So that's a bit more higher number than we actually, if we just look at the presence of green environment in Helsinki. So we also compared the use, the places that people used at least once a week, and also places that people were using a little more rarely. And they look quite similar. The hotspots are on the large green areas, but there are some minor differences. Those areas that are used less than once a week, they are more like a bit more focused on coastal areas, but also on sites that have landscape or cultural historical values. So that's something we were looking at. So the hotspots on the large green areas. And of course we wanted to know why people visited these areas. So people were mentioning many different things, but by counting all of them, people were mentioning that the reason why they go there was the scenery, but also kind of possibilities for nature experiences, and also they mentioned that they are easily accessible and they are safe, and also that there are good recreational and sport facilities in these areas. To conclude, what could we do to promote the physical activity in nature environments in urban areas? We need to preserve green environments in urban areas, but we also need to improve the accessibility to large green areas, because they provide many of these services people are mentioning in this survey, that people are appreciating these. And we also need to remember that there are different needs for different user groups. So we need to provide services for different kind of groups. And of course we realize that there is services and support needed for the group that are not physically active. So it's necessary to increase their level of physical activity. And what we would like to do next is that we would like to look more in detail the residents' relationship to nature and how that's linked to the green exercise. And we also want to look more the accessibility and resident satisfaction to neighboring green areas, and how that is linked to the self-reported health. And there is also, I'd like to mention, there is a new project just starting, and Luke is part of that, and it's clearinghouse, and it's an opportunity to look these things more deeply. Yeah, here I have listed some of the literature that was mentioned in my presentation. So by saying that, I thank you all, and I'm happy to have some questions if you have.
Thank you, Mario, for a very nice presentation and familiar pictures from around
Okay.
nice places like ice skating under the metro
Yeah,
tunnel.
Not in this winter, but
No, unfortunately.
unfortunately.
Again, the same procedure. If you have an immediate question or comment to Mario, we could take it in here. Yes.
Thank you, Mario, for very good and informative presentation. In your survey, you mentioned that you also collected information what improvements people want to have. Any examples what came out from that point of view?
Yeah, people also gave their responses on that, and I wasn't able to fit them in this presentation, but people were worried about degradation of nature, for example, because of forest loggings or the area was under construction. Maybe the place was unsafe for them, or it was noisy, or it had an unpleasant scenery, or there was pollution, or things like that was mentioned. So there were many of them, but those were the most frequently mentioned issues. And when we were calling some of the people, people were also worried what is going to happen to the green environment next to them. So people are really kind of if there are plans for construction. So that's really worrying people.
Yes, when the average distance to these green areas was almost 3 kilometers, did you study what means of transport did people use to travel there? Of course, walking, cycling, but what about the role of public transport, for example?
Yeah, that's not unfortunately taken into account in this picture. Basically, I think majority of these visits that are marked on the map are done by walking and by maybe using by bicycle. But of course, public transportation or using their own car is also possible. But that's really good question. And of course, one aspect of accessibility is that you have a good connection also if you don't have a car and you would like to go on the other side of the town. So that's really one point of accessibility. And also the parking lots available next to maybe one or possibility for easy parking is for someone it's important because if you are not it's part of the accessibility if you don't if you have problems with walking or so on and you need a transportation.
Okay, maybe that concludes this section, and we move on to the third presenter, who is Dr. Riikka Paloniemi. You come from Environmental Policy Center of Environmental Research Institute of Finland. I always get confused with the names. And Riikka is going to talk about health and well-being topics as well, and you have interesting new results from Nature STEP project, am I correct?
Yes.
So please, floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for this opportunity. And if you have any questions during this presentation, please ask them. It will be more comfortable if you have something to say. Okay, and Chris already presented rather nicely these nature-based solutions. They are solutions to social challenges based on opportunities and models created by ecosystems, their elements and processes. Concluding ecological, economic and social sustainable things and are comprehensive. And this has been promoted quite a lot in Europe by European Commission, and IUCN, International Union for Nature Conservation, has been really strong in going towards to this direction, mainstreaming biodiversity through this approach. And what I think is really relevant here is that we combine various aspects. For example, biodiversity must be there, but currently we have been increasingly discussing about health benefits of nature in cities, and also how we could tackle climate change through nature. Is there a role for nature in the cities? And there are many examples in Europe where various nature-based solutions have been promoted. Chris gave you examples. I don't repeat these, but this Urban Nature Atlas, you all also mentioned, is really good if you want to make this kind of searches where nature-based solutions have been implemented. You can make quick searches there, and I chose you a few of them, combining this biodiversity, health, and climate change. But as we may see that there's still rather few of them in Europe. And that is something that we must pay more attention to. I have 3 conclusions here in the presentation, and this is one of my first one. Health benefits of nature are increasingly approached in Finland and Europe on individual and social scales. We are pushing it forward, but there's still a lot to do. And I think that this can be one way to give a major success in achieving many things, because health is so important for everybody, for us. Okay? There are various health benefits that comes from the forests or from the urban nature. There is biodiversity, animals, we see landscapes, we hear. We have lots of memories and culture that are related to nature, both in urban and rural contexts. And then these produce us many things. We can do sports there, we have relaxation, food, pick berries, make some exercise. And then there is healthy human microbiota that comes when we come us to our bodies when we spend time in nature. And this is something that have been increasingly discussed in Finland quite a lot. Institute for Health and Welfare, Syke, Luke, many of these national institutions, University of Helsinki, have been really strong in pushing forward, thinking that we really need nature contact with diverse nature. Declining biodiversity, it is causing some microbial degradation in our bodies, and finally, high risk of inflammatory diseases. We are getting more sick if we don't have direct contacts to nature. Okay, or we can even change this to more social level. We have a right to environment that is not harmful for our health and well-being, or should we or even have a right to health environment? Or should this be emphasized on even more stronger frames in our social discussions? Okay. Now we are approaching it in various ways, but we still need new practices. How we could take most of the urban nature. If it's there, what we should do in order to achieve those health benefits. It doesn't help if nature is there, not even that we have access to it. We still have to stay there, have contacts for these microbes. to get those benefits from the health perspective. And one interesting example that we have been involved with LUKE, THL, Institute of Health and Welfare, and SYKE is Nature Step for health and well-being, or this kind of Nature Step. And this is focusing on kids. For kindergarten, as Chris, you mentioned that there is this things that kids are living in the grey environment and nature in the other part of cities. This is something that we must especially pay attention to, because these kids are needing this direct contact really much more than us middle-aged people. And it's not only the question of where nature is, but how it's used. That's why we produced this action model for early childhood education, how we could take a nature step towards well-being. And this is based on various aspects: sustainable development and circular economy. How we can get this kind of lifelong learning approach to get positive relationship with nature and with food. This positive approach for education or everyday living in the kindergartens. Eating more vegetables, eating more berries, having longer visits in the nature, playing there, learning by doing. Okay. And here are these kind of steps. We can eat more vegetables, learn about enjoying from food, and let kids to participate in preparing the meals, eating them, serving them, and then decrease food waste. Quite a lot. When we eat vegetarian food, there's increasing amount of food waste. That is something that we must think about. We learn to eat, we learn to appreciate food. And then we can take those regular contacts with nature. Stay there longer visits, not only 1 hour or maybe whole day, learning there, making there, for example, gardening, making exercising mathematics, so these kind of things, staying there. But this is not just saying that please go there and do these things. We need cooperation between various actors to organize these things. We need communication and training. We may even need to change the culture, how we organize our days, how we can include those actions in the everyday life, and how we get this kind of sustainable development a natural part of everyday life. And we have concluded here various actors with whom we need cooperation in order to make this kind of more systemic change, getting those nature-based solutions in everyday life of kids in various parts of cities, in various regions. Of course, we need to engage early childhood educators and children. They know best what they need or what they can. Families to get a support for these actions. And then daycare center management, facilitating cooperation, how to do it, how to get things done effectively. Food catering services, they may need to change menus. They may need new skills and capacities to produce new type of food that is good for kids. Then we need municipalities. They need to renew their systems. They maybe need to create new green spaces. It's not only planning, it's also managing the sites. How these various types of green areas, they need different type of maintenance. That must be ensured by municipalities. Okay. And then we need a systemic change, this is my third point, to achieve the whole spectrum of nature-based solutions. We need those spaces, we need accessibility and those practices in everyday life that support these actions, this sustainable behavior of people. Of course, these systems need to support each other, otherwise it doesn't work. Okay. And if I still think a little bit what kind of green areas may support this kind of healthy living of kids, using nature in a way that it increases our health and well-being. What do you think, if you think these kind of nature-based solutions, rather small scale, may be effective in managing storm waters, or this kind of more comprehensive places where bigger areas have been planned, functions of these sites have been planned? Much more easier for kindergarten personnel to get kids to these kind of places. Much more inspiring, and in many things much more effective to combine biodiversity, health and climate resilience. Okay. And to get these kind of more diverse multifunctional sites, we need multi-scale planning for nature-based solutions. We need to pay attention to regional scale. We must safeguard biodiversity and produce on a bigger scale ecosystem services. And then we need this kind of urban green roofs, smaller scale green parks to bring benefits of the nature for daily lives of people. And then we need corridors or this kind of combining things that ensure the linkages between urban nature and the core nature areas, for example, national parks or another 2,000 sites in the European cities. Okay, we need this kind of more holistic approaches in many sense to get those benefits. Okay, and I also concluded here some references if you want to check further. Thank you.
Thank you, Riikka, for a very nice presentation. Maybe some immediate questions now to Riikka. Yes, Rachel.
Hello.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm from the North American context, and we talk a lot about traditional ecological knowledge and indigenous sort of histories and traditions and places. Is there any inclusion of other forms or other sources of knowledge when we're trying to implement or find or research these nature-based solutions for this context?
Really interesting question. I don't know. I think that if you think municipal planning, if you think European cities, it is quite a lot emphasis on this kind of thing that we need to encourage people to have a say in the planning processes, and we need to see how they use various places and what is important for them. I think this kind of pattern mapping that is made, this kind of GIS, is towards this direction, but we have in Finland, we don't have this kind of similar indigenous thing that you have in US and in Canada. We have those indigenous people in North. That is not like in this urban context. This is not so familiar. And in Finland, we have this kind of indigenous thing when quite a lot taught when we are planning more wilderness type of areas, this kind of rural areas. Then it comes to the question. But yes, the same question, how to integrate people with various background is especially relevant here, and it's general.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to comment on that. I'm Tiina Nieminen from Luke, and maybe we don't have really in the past traditional knowledge, but the recent city planning, the so-called forest suburbs, are unique thing in the world. And then you kind of already in the planning state combined wilderness with build environment, and you didn't need to build green infrastructures afterwards, and the biodiversity values are much higher, and in a way you don't even need to go out to use the biodiversity, because there's a difference if your housing area is surrounded by trees, even more or less wild trees, wilderness, and the air you breathe is different than if you live really in the city center, or the modern, really dense suburb areas where kind of the idea is that you live your life isolated from the nature, and then you travel to the green infrastructure to get the benefits. That's in a way another way of thinking, but already in 60s and 70s when these forest suburbs were built, they were kind of realizing the later hypothesis of biodiversity impacts on human health. If you look at the articles by that time by architects and medical people, medical doctors.
Definitely, yes. Good that you mentioned. Yeah.
Anything you want to?
No, thank you for commenting. These really valuable comments. Yeah. Is there any further comments?
I think it's probably a few minutes. Okay, I see one more. There's time.
Oh, thank you for the presentation. I was just thinking about the concept, and maybe this can be a question for all presenters today. Can a nature-based solution also be, well, to me this seems very like you start managing something, you start building infrastructure, but could it also be not building something? I mean, not lawning your grass or whatever your land, so that you could also spend a lot of taxpayer money, and that could also be a solution. But does that count? For example, along the roads and roadsides, so that you have a lot of potential for biodiversity, a rich biodiversity, but they are now with taxpayer money, they are all taken down every summer. So is that something you could include?
You want to start, Riikka, and maybe then the others can also.
I would argue, maybe I should get up. I would argue yes, that can be a nature-based solution, but the bylaws in municipalities don't often allow this. And I cannot really talk from a Helsinki perspective, but I've done some work in Winnipeg, Canada, where one of the residents we interviewed was saying exactly that. She'd like to have 1.5 metre speargrass growing in her front yard and on the council verge, but the municipality did not like that because they said grass had to be under like a foot high at all times. So there are laws and policies preventing certain things from happening, and so that's a governance question as much as a policy question. Yeah. That would be my short response.
Anything would you like to say?
Yeah, I was thinking the places people were mapping, so there were also markings on the sites that were really not constructed at all, like the beaches and coastal areas in Helsinki. But also at the same time, some of our residents, they want to have some facilities like what comes to the green exercise. They want to have some paths and things like that. Or in the winter, in the normal winter, we would need some skiing tracks and so. But yeah, that's really a good question and point.
I was thinking that my favorite aspect in this concept is that we have this kind of social challenges, whatever they are. And for example, we think that there are challenges how kids are focusing on their studies or these kind of things, or we want to mitigate climate change. And then we start thinking that what is the role nature or ecological processes, ecosystems play in solving these challenges. And of course it can be nature sites that are not managed, or for example Uutela or Central Park in Helsinki, they have huge role in solving many things. I think that major strength is to seeing that there is opportunities to solve current challenges, and nature is a key there, how we can do it.
Some other questions that would be relevant for possibly all three presenters? I think Chris would like to say something.
Question for the audience. maybe I'll pick on people if I don't get anyone. Who has been working with nature-based solutions in their work, either in research or in policy before? One, yes.
Good.
Who has been working on green infrastructure? Yeah. Who sees a difference between green infrastructure and nature-based solutions? You can. Would you like to help define it?
Can I ask you to say something? No.
What did
I can help clarify, or did someone else want to try and answer what the difference is? Because we've come from this long literature and scholarship around green infrastructure, but now we're going into this area of nature-based solutions. What motivated that change? Do you want to try to answer that?
What motivated the change? I think that in Europe we have this tradition of two paths, this kind of biodiversity conservation. We have strong Natura 2000 directive and this kind of nature conservation policies. And then we have this kind of policy for ecosystem services. What are those benefits nature in general is producing to our society? And then we have, I think this is part of this path, that we are emphasizing those benefits that nature has for society, or what are those benefits that are coming from ecological process. And then we have this kind of this continuum from grey infrastructure to green, and we have in the urban Europe, in the Central Europe, in urban context, they have quite a lot grey infrastructure there, and they are bringing nature back to the cities. And that is the tradition that this concept in Europe is carrying on.
I have nothing, but I knowledge on this, but an idea came to my mind because you said that the business models and the kind of private sector effort to internalize these benefits, would it be one?
Yeah, that's certainly one of the reasons how to bring the business sector into the discussion around not only nature design and nature conservation, but a range of other benefits, including well-being benefits, social inclusion benefits, etc. But the other is, interestingly, nature-based solutions was introduced by the European Commission, so it's policy-driven. Most concepts are often research-driven, and from my understanding after speaking to policymakers in the Commission, one of the reasons they wanted this to happen is that they wanted different sectors to start to work together in ways that had not worked before. Green infrastructure was so tied to the green movement and biodiversity conservation. So they wanted a new concept which would engage with the business sector, but also with non-government organisations, the health sector, climate adaptation sector, etc. So it was a way to try to engage with different communities. And hopefully we're seeing that through these Horizon 2020 projects, etc. now. So, thanks.
Yeah, we have been involved in a few projects in Syke with nature-based solutions, and there are some municipalities in Finland, Helsinki and Jyväskylä especially, they have been emphasizing nature-based solutions quite a lot. And my feeling or interpretation is that when health comes to the table, it's really like opening concept. People are really open for new ideas. It somehow combines or connects various actors, and I think it has been quite a successful approach.
Would you like to, Mario, reflect on this?
Yeah, in a sense that I think in Finland the health sector is now kind of waking up to see the opportunities of green environments, and I think in the municipalities there are very good examples to promote things, and I'd like to mention perhaps Sipoo, and so there's a lot of happening also, but it's a big step, so I think it takes also time.
Yeah.
I think Jaana back there has the final question or comment, and then we will close.
Yeah, it is a question. Thank you for the all the presentations. But actually, I have a question that mostly relates to the Christopher's presentation, and it's about this business models. I have been thinking here all the time that what sort of business models there could be based on nature-based solutions that are also very inclusive. Like, do you possibly have good examples where this kind of private sector engagement has been done in the logic that it really benefits and creates value for the wider society?
Thank you for the question. It's probably the most challenging area of any Horizon 2020 project. How do you engage with the business sector? One thing is how do you engage with them. The second of all, how do you develop business models which ensure replication of nature-based solutions? I advise a range of projects on nature-based solutions, and there are different ways of going about it. Some are emphasising how to influence shareholder involvement in businesses through nature-based solutions. So, for example, one project is working with PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is the big stock firm, and they basically sold the idea to executives that if you provide more nature-based solutions to your staff, e.g. on green roofs and green walls, you're going to increase staff retention. Now, that's one of their biggest issues, because if you get a senior fund manager leave, that is a huge expense to your organisation, particularly if they are one of the gurus in share training in your organisation. So they are now looking at the economic benefits of nature-based solutions indirectly through staff retention and also staff well-being. They're collecting evidence to show that staff are less likely to be sick or off work when you have a cohesive environment, and the green has a role in supporting that cohesion. So that's where we're talking about co-benefits in a slightly different way. So that's not saying, we need... It's a business model in the sense of not finding direct funding for the nature-based solutions, but it's an indirect motivation which is leading to the upscaling of nature-based solutions. That's probably the best example I can explain, but there are a range of other financing models that these Horizon 2020 projects are looking at. Some have been more successful than others. The biggest issue is that many of them still require a lot of government investment in the early stages. And we all know that government money is limited for the seeding of new finance models. So.
Excellent ending. So I thank you, audience here locally, and I also thank you, those who have been following us on stream. And just a final reminder of the next topics. So February 25th, we will have a next Viikki Sustainability Research Seminar, which is focusing on Global Sustainable Development Report, and it is hosted by Finnish expert panel on sustainability. And then end of March, we will have a focus on sustainable farming, and then end of April, we will go about land use and climate action topics. So thank you for joining us today, and see you hopefully next time around.